when Jesus was gathering up these disciples by the Sea of Galilee, calling them out by name one by one, have you ever wondered why they had to leave their nets down, why they had to leave their jobs as fishermen, why they had to leave their families? It's a bit extreme, isn't it, to leave all this behind in order to follow Christ? Was it really necessary to leave their daily job of fishing? Couldn't their job of fishing for fish actually mutually enrich their role of now fishing for people? What's going on? Some would say it was fanatical, what they were doing. But maybe you today see it differently because culture has changed, hasn't it? Where many of you, by the time you retire, will have changed jobs and vocations in life. It's rare for someone to finish in the same job that they began. So maybe it's not so bad. But what does it mean to be gathered up in this way by Jesus? What does it mean for us today to be gathered in by Jesus? I want to show that there's something happening with our identity when we follow Christ. There's a renovation of our identity. I want to show that being gathered in Jesus means becoming a player in the kingdom story. And I want to show being gathered by Jesus shows the authority of Jesus, that Christ is this author of all our stories in the kingdom story. But first of all, what's going on with our identity? Well, a few generations ago in Ireland, if you were to say a surname, a family name, you could almost automatically connect that name to a trade. For example, David's father's side were Corey, and if you mentioned that name, Corey, in County Down, everyone would automatically associate it with butchers. And in my first parish, there was a family named Woodside, which would be the farmers, or it would be the haulage business. Woodside was very well known for those two trades. And if you were part of those families, you would carry pressure to maintain the business, because this business was what provided security, identity, trade. John Betjeman was under pressure. He was this famous poet in England, and his father had a very famous family business, and Betjeman was under huge pressure by his dad to maintain the family line, the family honor. But deep inside, Betjeman was craving to be a poet. Unfortunately for us, he honored that calling, eventually became a poet laureate, and he wrote many beautiful poems following his poetic dream. But today's culture is different from those generations ago, isn't it? Our culture has changed. I was reading this week an article by David Brooks he wrote last year, and it talks about, the title is "The Nuclear Family Was a Mistake." And he uses this movie, Avalon. I don't know if you've seen it, I haven't, but I was very taken by his description of the story. This family had emigrated from Europe. There were 5 in the family. When they came to America, they set up a business, a family trade of wallpapering. And at the start, the scenes of the movie are to do with big extended family gatherings at Thanksgiving, where there's just so many crammed into a room, and after they eat, they all slump in the couch and are very satisfied and happy. But as the years go on, the family dynamics begin to change. One of the brothers moves out of state to another city, so he can't be part of the family business. Another two move to the suburbs of the city, and they become a little bit more removed and live in privacy. And so there's this scene that really breaks open what's going on there, where they're back at the Thanksgiving. And the eldest brother comes late to realize that the family has already started their meal, and he just explodes. He says, "You cut the turkey without me? Your own flesh and blood?" And it may seem like just this little tiny trigger, but what's going on is this microcosm that people now feel left out of the family. And as the movie goes on right to the end, you see the family just getting smaller, more broken, more fractured, until people are eating their Thanksgiving turkey on a tray, watching the TV. It's so sad. And Brooks is pointing out this is what's happening to family. Family is suffering at the expense of individualism. Life has become freer to make individual choices, but it's meant that family has become less stable as a result. So some of you might still be in the family business mode, trying to maintain what's been passed on to you. But for many of us sitting here today, the pressure of identity is carved out in a different way, where you feel the pressure to make it on your own, to carry the burden of choices, not just for you, but for your children. Because jobs maybe are no longer secure, and the pandemic has certainly shown that for many of you who've had to change jobs. And either way, whether you're still in the family business or whether you're trying to carve out your niche, there's this exhausting pressure of trying to make choices. You're researching the right therapist to meet your child's specific needs. You're researching the right school program that will enable your child to flourish. In your work or in your identity, you're endlessly reinventing all these techniques for your trade, whatever it is. And it's in this context that Jesus calls. Jesus gathers people to himself, to be part of his family, his extended family of love. And what makes this calling, this gathering in on the Sea of Galilee that day so rich and distinctive? It's different from the way that the rabbis were gathering up their disciples. If you wanted to follow a rabbi leader, you'd probably do what we would do. You would research, you would assess the rabbi on their teaching. And when you find that right rabbi to follow, you would be the one who would walk up to them and say, "Can I study the law under you?" But this isn't what's happening at the Sea of Galilee that day. The fishermen aren't looking for a rabbi that day. They're simply fishing. They're not in a synagogue. They're by the sea. And here it is Jesus who's doing the choosing. Jesus is doing the calling. Come follow me. Come follow my life, my ministry, and get involved. And this is revolutionary. For those whose identity is so tied into their family trade, or those whose identity is just heavy with all the choices to try and make it in life, Jesus is calling you out and gathering you in to renovate your identity. He's saying, follow me so that you can find your life again in the kingdom. Later on, Jesus said, if anyone comes to me and doesn't hate their father and mother, their wife, their children, yes, even his own life, they can't be my disciple. That's hard to hear today. Because didn't Jesus say you shouldn't hate anyone, not even your enemies? What's going on? And yet I think what's going on here, it isn't active hate, it's comparative. Tim Keller puts it nicely. He's saying, Jesus was saying, I want you to follow me so intensely that all the other attachments you have in life look like hate by comparison. And so there's a decentering of our own identity to reorient it and recenter it on Christ. Because the danger is, if we simply take in Jesus' words as good advice, but continue life the way we've always continued our lives, then we're still at the center. We can cherry pick what words of advice we're going to take seriously and what we're going to not. And it also means we can have a tinge of superiority to anyone who isn't following the way we are. And that's not Christianity. The Christian life is radical. It's a reorientation with Jesus at the center. That's what repentance is, a reorientation. Letting go of attachments and then positively holding on to Jesus. And it's believing that this kingdom life is the fullest expression of life you will ever get. This kingdom life is rich, it's full, it's free. So Jesus gathering people in, yes, it's this renovation of identity, but it's also to do with stepping into the kingdom. Did you notice how before Jesus called the disciples, he was saying words like, the time is come, the time has come, the kingdom is near. That word time is kairos. It's different from just going through the motions chronologically. It's saying something significant is happening here that's worth paying attention to. Kairos time. And when Jesus said the time has come, the word come means filling up, a bit like an empty glass. You're pouring in something into this empty glass. And if you imagine this world is this empty glass, Jesus is beginning to pour in the kingdom in such a way that we don't see the glass anymore, but we see kingdom work and all that Jesus does. That kingdom means restoration. It means healing miracles. It means liberation, setting the prisoners free. And we begin to get a glimpse of kingdom breaking into this time and this space in a wonderful way. And this kingdom is being set up in the short words that Kevin and Maggie were reading so beautifully. In those short words, it's laden with kingdom imagery. Just before that scene of the gathering in at the Sea of Galilee, we've been in the wilderness where Jesus was tempted for 40 days. And then there's this interesting phrase right at the end. After Jesus succeeded, it says Jesus was ministered to by the angels and lived with wild animals. Doesn't it strike you as strange that Jesus was hanging out with the wild animals? Imagine that. But this is kingdom. This is the reversal of what happened when Adam was tempted in Genesis. And there was this brokenness in creation. The prophecy of Isaiah is coming true that when Jesus, the second Adam, overcomes temptation, then there's harmony. The wolf is lying literally down with the lamb. This is creation restored, kingdom breaking in. And Jesus is inviting his disciples to say, follow me and see kingdom at work. Follow me and see what John was talking about as the messenger who was prophesied in Isaiah as preparing the way. And so you see, the disciples were downing their tools, not just because this is the best advice they had that day, but they were submitting to kingdom living. They were choosing to sit under the authority of the king. Because you see, what was going on in Israel at that time is a little similar to what's going on in America today. There were political factions pulling each other apart. And there was this hunger for an ideology that would break through. And they were looking desperately for someone, a king, to come and lead them through. And yet, Jesus' contemporaries were trusting in their land, in their ancestry, in what they thought they knew was right in the law. And they were looking for a king to fit in to their political ideology. But Jesus wasn't going to do that. Oh no, Jesus wasn't going to fit in to any political stance. But he was going to destabilize it all so that the new center would revolve around Jesus Christ. And that's why this idea of authority is so important. Somehow Jesus had the authority to call these disciples, and they followed. Even though it didn't make sense, Jesus didn't say, I'm going to show you what's next. He didn't say that. He didn't tell them or sell them the idea of the new role that they were going to have. It was simply follow me. Jesus had a curious authority that enabled those disciples to let go of absolutely everything and sit under this new king. And this idea of authority is important because literally the word authority means the original stuff. The original stuff. You know, when pastors preach, we're interpreters. We maybe are able to see something a little bit different or new in a text and bring it so that you can see something new. But that's not the authority Jesus had when he was preaching at the temple. Because the authority Jesus had wasn't derived, it was the original stuff. Because Jesus was the author. That's why he had authority. He was the author of the hearer's existence. Jesus was the author of their lives. And so when Jesus was gathering disciples in, it was like saying, come be part of my team because I authored you. I know how you're made. I know what inspires you. And I know where you'll fit in to my team. Have you ever watched a really good coach at work on the sports field, whatever the sport is? And I love when a coach really understands players so well that when they face a different team, they're able to say, now, you just make this slight adjustment, and maybe you're on the right wing, but try the left wing today. And sometimes it's just that one little adjustment that sets the game in a whole other trajectory. But that's the skill of a good coach that knows and loves and respects these players so well. They know just enough movement to win a game. And Jesus is our coach, our author, who knows each of you so well that if we listen to Christ's voice and follow and make those kind of adjustments, we can live the fullest life that Christ wants us to live. Christ is the one that's bringing this fullness to the team. And Christ was saying, be part of my team, being fishers of people. In some ways, there's similarity in the metaphor of fishing, but in many ways, this idea of fishing for people is different. When the disciples were fishing for their fish, they were taking them out of the water, and then they were dying. But when the disciples were fishing for people, it wasn't for them to die, but it was for them to live resurrection life. When the disciples were fishing for fish, it was for their own security, to build up this business, to survive. But to fish for other people, it's saying, I'm here not for my own security, but to show love to you so that you can thrive. It's decentering who you are. And that's risky business because it means you're no longer in control of your life. And that's terrifying. It's still terrifying for me. But our calling is to bring this love out in the world. And I wonder, when you wake up in the morning, is that the call that you hear to show Christ's love on the line in your life? Because I know for me, that's not what I think about. I think about church, I think about meetings, I think about lists and tasks. During the pandemic, how do we pivot to a virtual platform that's attractive? I think about all these things, but to love others in the same way Christ has loved me, that should be at the center. Eugene Peterson says, every day I put love on the line and there's nothing I'm less good at. I'm better at charging ahead with my own energy and steam. I'm better at putting myself first, and every day I decide it's better to fail at love than succeed in pride. And that really gets to the heart of what's going on in this calling, because if we don't have love at the center, then of course we're going to find security in what we do. And we depend on our own strength. We depend on our own expertise. Don't know. Expertise? What do you say? Expertise, there we go. One moment, how do you say it here? That happens when you're in another country. Anyway, you think about your gifts, you think about what you're saying. And if you do that long enough, you get caught up in that circle and the whirlpool of who you are, your identity, instead of living in the kingdom story that Christ has authored for you. You become a technician. You become a fisherman instead of fishing for people. And the challenge is we get rewarded, don't we, in this world for that? Because this world and even the church applauds people who have a strategy and a plan and have expertise. And we get rewarded from living out of our false selves. But this isn't love. And when I think of these things, I think of David Adam, who taught me a lot about Celtic Christianity and how in Europe at the time there was Christianity growing all over Europe, but the Celtic pathway of Christianity was so different. This is what he writes about the Celtic church. He says, too often the church acts as if it possesses God, as if it could produce God at will, like a white rabbit coming out from the folds of a white coat. It's as if it's something we own and we can give Christ to others. And it's at that point that Christ does the vanishing trick, because the church has got caught in the imperialist role, saying to others, I have this and it's good for you. Take it. And without what I have, you're poor, you're ignorant. I'm the possessor of what you need to receive. And the danger of this Christian so-called approach is that it destroys rich cultures and beautiful treasures. A wealth of spirituality has been lost. But the Celtic church was different, because it didn't so much seek to bring Christ as to discover Christ in the other. Not to possess Christ, but to see Christ in the friend and in the stranger. To liberate the Christ who's already there in all his riches, so different from the imperialist project, but to sit and humbly accept the other who comes to you, to share and learn from them. It's not the way of the conqueror, but it's the way of the explorer, the adventurer. That's what the disciples were being called to do when they walked with Jesus, to discover Christ at work in the world. And the striking thing is, this happened right at the start of Jesus' ministry, so that wherever Jesus went, the disciples were there. That's the rhythm, that's the pattern. The disciples were always there with Jesus, watching. Have you ever wondered why that was? Well, aren't they the ones who get to tell the story? The Peter, the James, the Andrew. They were there to legitimize the witness, because they were there right at the start. And in the same way that John was being handed over into prison, Jesus was also doing a handing over, a curious handing over, to say to these disciples, you're going to tell the story. It wasn't Jesus who told the story. It was the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John who get to tell the story. And that's your calling today, to get inside this kingdom story of which Jesus is the author. But you're called to tell the story. When you're standing in front of your class of second graders, you're the one telling the story of Christ. When you're lecturing to students, you're telling the story. When you're parenting obstreperous children, you're telling the story. When you're in your office or in your surgery, you're telling the story of love. Jesus handed over the story to you in the same way that Jesus handed over himself to Pilate to be crucified. The divine passive is at work in us. And this can be overwhelming, can't it? How can we be authentic disciples that tell the story? Well, a few things. One, you listen to the voice carefully of Jesus, what Jesus is telling you to do. And if the voice is not clear, then you need to rediscover how to make it clear in your life again. But there's another image I want to leave you with, and it's an image I was reminded of again this week by seeing this sculpture picture by Charlie Mackesy of someone else who left their job to come home to God. It's the story of the prodigal son. And Charlie Mackessy's this wonderful artist based in London. And for years, he was this agnostic artist, didn't believe in God at all. And he came to faith when he was at a concert, and it was an outdoor concert. He went to the restroom, which was one of those portable, horrible outdoor. And he was sitting there, and he heard the good news being sung, "Oh, happy day." And it really struck him, the joy of people singing "Oh, happy day," that he ended up just sobbing in that restroom. Sobbing so much that he slipped and fell down into the muck. But that's the remarkable story of Charlie Mackesy coming to faith. And this sculpture of the prodigal son, I've seen it, and it just gets me every time, because the son has made that decision to leave it all behind and come to the Father. And the way Mackesy has the son, his arms are just like that. And the Father is embracing him while the arms are so heavy. And I get the heaviness. I get the heaviness. I see, my children, when they don't do well on the sports pitch and maybe they've done something wrong, they go, "Ugh, I failed." And I get the heaviness in life when there's just too much to carry. It's a busy world, it's stressful, and you just want to have your hands down. And I see it in people that I love with the Parkinson's, and their arms are heavy. And Christ is holding us all in that embrace, saying, "It's my love that will carry you. You don't need to carry the world, but it's my love that will carry you." And so as we reflect on that calling, that Jesus calls us by name when we're not looking for it, what do you need to just let go of today so that you can embrace that love and be embraced by it and be held by it? What are the things that are really annoying you in this world? What are the things in your workspace that you are working so hard to fit in and it's just not working? What do you need to let go of and let the Father embrace you? That's all the calling is, to allow the embrace to enfold you. It's so simple, and yet it's so hard to do the longer you live. But it's that love that sets you free. And so as we listen to the response, hear those words. The love of God is greater, far than tongue or pen can tell. It goes beyond the highest star and reaches to the lowest hell. O love of God, how rich and pure, how measureless and strong, it shall forevermore endure. The saints' and angels' song, to write the love of God above would drain the ocean dry, nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. And as you listen to this song, I invite you, let your arms just sink down. Just let them fall and say, "Lord, I'm going to let you love me today." That is the calling. And may you find your center and your identity in this beloved, extended, wonderful family that is a kingdom family that lasts forever and ever. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.